And in about 1 minute, Aaron will guide us in a nice, energized way to get this final session started. Beautiful. So welcome to the final panel of this conference, final official panel or final official session. Hopefully there are informal sessions that pop up emerging from the conference. And the theme for this session is deep connections, local resilience, global solidarity. And it's going to be an exploration, discussion space. Also, we'll hear people share their individual stories with these themes. So this will be an engaging session. So be ready to engage. And to start this engagement, I will pass it to Aaron, who will guide us on a little movement.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good middle of the night. Thank you for being here. Namaste oi, as we say in our transcultural meetings. So one of the things that's been really alive for me through these last 4 days is how important it is to learn with all of our different faculties. And so I want to invite us, instead of just being a collection of 56 heads, that we come into our bodies. And so I'm going to invite that through some breath. And so if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes or you can leave your eyes open. Just into 5 slow, conscious breaths. And really do this. Take the time. It's just a few seconds. So whenever you're ready, just take some nice, slow, conscious breath. And notice how it is that you feel in the body that you inhabit today in this moment. Like, what's really present here inside of you? Feel whatever parts of your body are touching the earth, and to notice what's present in you today. And this isn't just the separate individual self that you maybe through modernity and our Western systems have come to believe you are. So remembering that we're the interbody, that we are not only ourselves. And now I want to invite us, because the other thing that I learned in these 4 days is that flirting is a political act, and it is also an art. And so I want to invite us to do a little experiment. And the first thing I want to invite is, if you don't have your camera on, turn it on. And I don't care if you are cooking or walking or shaving your legs or doing some other work and you're just kind of half here, because I've done all of those things during these last 4 days. Turn on your cameras. And there's 3 screens of people here. So you can flip through and you can see all of these beautiful faces from all over this beautiful planet. And I want you to invite you. Oh, I see so many friends here. Yay, I love it. So pick a person that you feel called to somebody that's drawing you in, and then move your little cursor. Oh, if you have no clothes on, well, maybe, you know, whatever. You could just show your face, but we're gonna pick one person and we're just gonna go move our little cursor over them and click on that little button with 3 dots. And then you're gonna pin that person to your screen. So pin one person to your screen, make them big. And then just for a couple seconds, you're just gonna flirt with that person. You can just use your eyes and maybe your body language. And you don't know who's flirting with you. They don't know that you're flirting with them, or maybe they do. Just take a moment. How would you flirt? How are you practicing the muscle of flirting as a political act? Okay, yeah. Now let's choose someone else. So just pick another person that you feel like, oh, I really would love to flirt with that person, and pin that next person to your screen. Oh my. And maybe, you don't know, think about, someone also is flirting with me. And it might not be the same person, but it might be. Yeah. And now with that little kind of cozy, warm feeling, you can go back to your gallery view up in the upper right corner of your Zoom screen, choose gallery view. And now let's just look around. How do you feel now? What's alive as you flip through these screens? Ooh. Yay. And as we traverse these next 80 minutes or so, just keep that little flame, that little warm feeling in your belly alive through this time, because this sensation, this kind of like phenomenological feeling that we have, is the essence of our relationality, of our interconnectedness. If you want to throw in the chat how you feel right now, go right ahead. And I'll pass it back to Dan now that we have our little flirty fuzziness alive here in the center of our virtual stomach.
Lovely. I see my tummy is hatching butterflies, creative, giggly, fizzy, sweaty. Wow, that was really intense. We got people sweaty through virtual flirting, fully energized, giddy, and happy. Beautiful. That's wonderful. And now I'm going to post some questions in the chat for you all to flirt with. And the initial invitation is to take a minute or two to yourself and read these questions and feel what answers come forth or what experiences come forth. And while you're doing that, we are going to set up breakout rooms of 3 to 4 people where the invitation is to explore these questions in community. So Sierra, could you please queue up 4 people breakout rooms and use this time before that to really read the questions and feel what comes forth.
Could you read it out loud for those in the phone, please?
Sure. So the first question is, why are deep relationships and deep connections so important? I'll read that one again. Why are deep relationships and deep connections so important? And the second question, why is local resilience important for surviving the future? And the second one once more, why is local resilience important for surviving the future? So for the next minute or so, please type any insights or anything you'd want to share with the group in the chat. And we'll give you about a minute or two to do this if you feel called to do so. Anything that came up in your conversation. From here, we will transition to hearing some individual stories. But first, please share any insights or wisdom that you got from your chat. Being held in a network. When in the presence of apparent paradox, I know you are approaching truth. Small is all. Moving from chaotic to chaotic. Connection equals feeling of belonging.
And may I share what Stephanie in breakout room shared?
Yes. Briefly though, please.
Yeah. So it was, since we have local manifestations, so it has to be local resilience only. So that was a very aha moment to listen to. Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie, for sharing it.
Beautiful. And I'll read a couple more that are coming in the chat. Connection is our natural state. We just have to go back to it. What are the things in life that sever connection and can question more? Entanglement. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I'll finish these readings with Adler's, Adler Yang. And Adler, you're going to be the first person to share as well. So I'll read what emerged from your breakout room. How do we define deep? These are questions that came to Adler. How do we define deep? How do we prevent certain definitions of marginalize other kinds of deep? So with that, I want to welcome Adler, and I also want to voice that Adler is here with us, even though there's a family emergency in his space. So I just also invite the group to kind of hold Adler's family. I see some hearts. We can just feel some love for Adler and his family situation. So Adler, I'll pass it. Now we're going to kind of do a round of sharing from the folks on the panel, and just 4 to 8 minutes or so, sharing what does this mean to you? What are deep connections, deep relationships, and maybe share some examples from your work on how you're enabling local resilience or what you're seeing around you. So without further ado,
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be in the Ecodiversities family. In our previous breakout room, we had some, although it was short, but I think we really had some deep relationships, and also we had some deep conversations and contemplations. So this question was actually raised by Bruno, who had to leave earlier for another event. And the immediate example or context that he raised this question is because that given that we are in front of Zoom and we only have such a short time for a breakout, and we only meet each other for such a short time, in what way might we form such deep relationship given such context, and given that there are so many sources of signals or information when we are talking about deepness in front of Zoom and in all this context. So then, building upon his question, we then come to that discussion, ongoing discussion, and probably wouldn't have a conclusion about how do we define deep and how do we prevent when we define deep and then marginalize other definitions of deepness, which I think is a probably eternal issue of humanity, and also a issue that we family members of Ecoversities Alliance hold very dear. And the other huge theme we discussed in our breakout room was about regarding modernity. And as I'm a education reformer, activist, and educator, I also do research on some of the challenges or wicked problems that I see civilizational. And among those is really about relationships. And as I mentioned in our group, I said that the value of deep connections, when we are prompted with this question, some keywords come to my mind, including like commitment, safety, security, and so on. And in contrast to that is actually the common experience we have in most of the industrial societies, which relationships are greatly commodified and also transactionalized. So when our relationship with ourselves, with others, and whether those others are humans or non-humans, when these relationships are commodified, it makes it shallow. And also with the further development of institutions, which I think this segues to our second question about local resilience, as the institutions grow stronger and stronger and capable of responding to individuals' needs, more and more capable of responding to our individual needs, then there seems to be a decrease in our need of each other. And so Bruno, who left earlier, actually gave a very short, but I think it's pretty representative anecdote that well, he's a Spanish and he's now living in Finland. In Spain, they think that having a lunch is what you do with anyone. But in Finland, what he experienced is that when you have a lunch with someone else, it means that you have a deep connection. So that's deep in that context. Maybe someone here or from Scandinavian countries who can provide more context and your experience, and maybe could correct you can correct me if I'm wrong, but based on my research on some literatures, for example, like random mass shooting, mass killing, most of these research conducted in Japan because they have several severe cases of random killing. So when people try to understand why do these random killing happen, and also why does this social isolation become more and more severe in so many countries, especially like in Japan, that people die alone without others noticed, and young people stay home alone, do not interact with each other, and do not go to the society. And some they are even called shut-ins. They don't even go to work, and so on. So from these literature, I see that when, as I said, that maybe so many needs of yours are satisfied by institutions. However, institutions are gradually replacing our needs of each other. And that makes for example, in quantitative studies, you will see this paradox that why in some countries they are so developed, for example, like Scandinavian countries and also maybe like Switzerland, they're developed in so many indicators, and typically they're also rated the happiest countries in the world. But why are suicide rates so high in these countries? In some of the literature I read is saying that it actually has similar explanations to the literature I read in Japan research, is that these happiness indicators quantitatively talk about some measures, but these measures are not related with that deep connection among us or among people and non-humans. So when we become so self-sufficient, then maybe life and death also become a self-sufficient thing. Of course, there are still many issues to be discussed, but this, I think, segues to the second question about local resilience. I actually, based on my ethnography on education system in East Asia, I have developed a working theory, which I call allocation dependence. By saying allocation dependence, it means that agents are dependent on the allocation of resources for their living, for their survival. And when they depend on such allocation of resources, they have to mold themselves into the parameters or the measures for such allocation. And that necessarily includes assimilation and trimming of unneeded qualities. The ethnography I did was actually in the education context, which in the alternative school I studied in Taiwan, that I followed my best friends in junior high school, that typically people will believe that if you study an alternative school, democratic school, you don't face the pressure of the society from the parents or teachers, then you should, your learning, and when you face the society, your learning won't be so test driven. However, when facing that test, I use it as a counterfactual study. And from that, I found that my best friends, they actually assimilate the popular culture of test preparation and so on. Okay, I see that I only have 1-2 minutes left. So then I continued to study for many years, and I found that dependence of institutions allocating resource to us become very controlling, and there are many implications that are necessitated by such mechanism, including because when you allocate resources based on specific measures, each agent's proximity to those measures cannot be standardized. So this necessitates inequality, basically, and also it entails so much control or standardization that we talk about in our conversations in the ecoversities family, and so on. So how do we transform or alleviate our dependence on institutions and such allocation process and become more interdependent among us? I think it really comes back to the questions that we just discussed: local resilience and deep connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Adler. Really beautiful. And we're going to pass it over now to Tina Costa, and hear a different perspective from a different part of the world. And Tina will be sharing in Portuguese, and Bianca will be supporting with translation. So welcome, Tina.
Okay. Olá.
Peraí. Hi. So tech host Sarah, can you yes.
So
just
everyone, I think you have to click on the English channel if you'd like to hear in English. And let me know in the chat if it's not working for you.
Me fala só quando puder, Bianca. Poder? Bianca vai
I think
traduzir.
it's ready. She can talk, but she's doing some signals.
Olá, eu sou a Tina, estou aqui no Brasil, num lugar muito peculiar, Zona Leste. Para a gente é muito... Nós estávamos num grupo agora, pequeno, discutindo, que foi... Nós chamamos de panelinha aqui no Brasil, porque no nosso grupo só tinha os brasileiros. E o que eu gostaria de comentar com vocês, de compartilhar com vocês, é que nós falamos um pouco sobre resiliência. A maior parte das pessoas com quem nós lidamos aqui no Brasil não tem noção do conceito da resiliência, apenas vive. Nós nascemos resilientes aqui no Brasil, por uma questão cultural. E, para exemplificar, eu conto um pouco da minha origem, uma historinha só, que talvez explique melhor o que nós entendemos por resiliência e como que a gente caminha por conexões profundas, relacionamentos que mudam a história e até pela solidariedade cooperativa. Quando eu era pequena, eu tenho uma memória da minha mãe me colocar entre as pernas delas no quintal para catar piolho, tirar piolhos da minha cabeça. Eu tinha muito piolho, o suficiente para todas as ecoversidades do planeta, muitos. E quando ela fazia isso, tirava os meus piolhos, ela compartilhava histórias da vida dela. As minhas tias e avós sentavam perto e elas iam conversando. Eu, criança, absorvia todo aquele saber que elas passavam para mim. E eu me lembro de que, de tempo em tempo, a minha mãe acarinhava o meu cabelo, porque não é tão fácil você ficar sentada naquele tempo todo. O que nós aqui no Brasil temos feito na Universidade das Kebradas, e cada um em seu território, nós temos catado piolhos. Nós temos tratado o coletivo com esse carinho do individual. Então, hoje, representados aqui por esse ecossistema que nós formamos através do Instituto NUA, da Favela da Paz, ou mesmo de pessoas como se a Débora, que faz parte do nosso grupo, quando ela toca um atabaque dentro do seu território, ela está renovando a esperança de uma criança, ela está criando um sonho. Quando o Nelson amassa o barro e faz uma casinha na Bahia, ele está devolvendo a dignidade de uma família. Quando qualquer um de nós encara uma comunidade sem esperança, sem sonho, e nós compartilhamos com eles os saberes que nós temos, a nossa cultura, e produzimos arte, música, permacultura, quando nós conseguimos fazer uma horta num lugar totalmente poluído, contaminado, quando nós conseguimos desarmar as nossas crianças e devolver a elas o instinto de sonho, nós continuamos catando piolhos. Não é fácil, não é uma esperança boba. Nós temos convicção de que isso vai trazer resultados para o Brasil e para o mundo. E dessa forma nós temos criado vínculos uns com os outros. Vocês sabem que o Brasil é um território bastante extenso. Nós demoramos, às vezes, cerca de 2 horas ou até 3 para sair de um bairro e ir para um outro bairro dentro de São Paulo, para vocês terem noção da dimensão territorial. Mas mesmo assim, dentro da universidade, nós temos conseguido criar vínculos profundos entre nós, através de uma linguagem que envolve a regeneração da confiança, um amor que tem responsabilidade uns com os outros e com o próximo, e, pasmem, através de um silêncio. Nós temos aprendido que às vezes é preciso silenciar um pouco tudo que a gente tem recebido de informação. Às vezes é preciso só ser uma composteira, como eu costumo brincar, né? Todos nós somos composteiras, a gente recebe muito lixo, muita informação o tempo todo, e às vezes a gente só precisa fazer a compostagem para devolver para o mundo aquilo que nós temos ainda de melhor, que é, de fato, essa capacidade inigualável do ser humano de criar e de fazer a manutenção das relações. Tudo isso com um propósito maior. Isso é um pouquinho do que a gente tem vivido aqui no Brasil, do que a gente tem tentado contribuir. E eu espero que eu aprenda mais aqui nesse lugar do que eu compartilhe. Por enquanto é só.
Thank you so much, Tina and Bianca, for the translation. What a beautiful share. And I invite you just to take a second and hold what Adler shared and what Tina shared, and just notice if there's any interconnections. I know they both came at it from very different perspectives. So just take a few seconds to let that settle before we move on to the next panelist. And from here, I'll invite Manish Jain to come and share as well. What does deep resilience or local resilience mean to you, and how are you, through your work, enabling it, and how is it showing up in your world? So Manish, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Namaste oi to everyone. So I think that the core, this is such a beautiful conversation. For me, the ethos and the core of ecoversities and our work in Swaraj University and the Jail University and Complexity University, and things I'm involved in, has been the politics, what I call the politics of friendship. Like, how do we build a movement based on deep friendship and trust and care, and that being not only the means but also the ends in some ways. Like when we can reweave this web of friendship and trust, we open the possibility for for magic to start happening, for things that, I mean, I've seen things that happen which one can never imagine. Like to have share an example in the Jail University, you know, having getting access to do all kinds of, to set up, you know, an organic farm in the jail with the inmates leading that process, or amazing music and and art being generated and transforming the whole institution, and that only comes when there's a deep trust, first with the inmates themselves, which we spent a lot of energy and effort focusing on and building that, but also a trust with the guards and the prison authorities, and so many things can grow out of that. And so somebody was with me yesterday. I went there. They were observing, that that I was hugging the guards and hugging the prisoners, and even hugging the superintendent of the jail, and having this deep sense of trust. And out of that, I think something different emerges. And so resilience, I would like to. There's a lot of beautiful things about resilience, but I think that one of the questions that I'm holding and we're holding in our work is, what is beyond the money system, and how do we start to, the conversation we had on starting our own ecoversities in the last session, the scarcity mindset is one of the deep, I would say, sicknesses of the modern educated mind. And how do we start to come out of that? So this field of trust is essential for accessing that, gift culture and all of the different kinds of real wealth in our communities. It can only be accessed when we create a field of trust. And in terms of the resilience piece of this, I would like to, with trust and resilience, bring out a little bit of an experiment that we are in Complexity University, is really, how do we step out of the mindset where there's some good guy and bad guy, and the ideological categories that we've created, and I see them in not only at macro levels, but in our own community. People split around political ideologies and economic ideologies, and labeling each other, and and where neighbors are, relationships have fallen down, and particularly in small towns, communities, villages. And so the resilience that we're trying to explore a lot is what is that kind of politics that can bring us to this trust again, and that becomes a different kind of frame for engaging with all of the crises framing us. Can we move beyond the ideological boundaries and frameworks that have been, that are all very, have a, deep wisdom in them, but they are, fragmenting us as people today, and as communities. So I think we are, there was in the Gandhian movement, there was something called the Shanti Sena, and these were the people who are the peace, the kind of peacekeepers at that time. And so I think there's almost a different kind of, Shanti, what I call the Shanti shapeshifters, people who can walk into different, whether it's corporate spaces or academic spaces or NGO spaces or left-wing or right-wing spaces, to open up new possibilities for engagement with and realize the other is not the other. So this paradigm of othering that we are trapped in, I think, is something that, I would like to add that to the conversation. Usually when we talk about resilience, it's like food system resilience and, all of those things. But how do we start to dissolve these boundaries? I think that's a new part of the resilience, which I think is a deep inquiry for us right now. And how do we, again, I'm saying, go beyond the God of money? So these are the things, and both of these seems to thanks Ayo for that. But yes, I'll just stop there, and hopefully that'll raise some more conversations. Thank you so much. Great to see everyone. Big hugs and kisses to everyone.
Yes, thank you, Manish. Big hug and kiss received and sent back in your direction. And the next panelist will be Chevanni. And you have a lot of threads to pick up on from Adler and Tina and Manish. So you're welcome to pick up on any of these threads or take it in whatever direction you feel called. So Chevanni, welcome.
Sawubona, which translates to I see you, and not sight of eyes, but more inviting us to think about how would we see each other without eyes? How would we see each other without touch? How would we see each other without smell and taste? And I think for this share, I would love to invite an intimate sense, and I love the flirting, so I'm going to even rope in some of the flirting there. I would love to rope in an intimate sense of deep connection, and I would like to invite us into a deep connection with our own bodies. I believe that is, I was in a talk re-signifying birth, and it spoke very similar into this idea that the womb, the uterus, is our first institution. And just this idea of birth and birth rituals and life and Genesis has been something that has been sort of in my work, both in community and also just as me and my body, re-understanding my reproductive organs, re-understanding sex and sensation and all of these ideas. And when I think about deep connection, I am yoked into the idea of, I know it's easy, my mind easily jumps to relationships external, like my relationship maybe with my partner, my relationship with my son, my relationship with Manish, my relationship with Dan, my relationship with the Ecoversities, and the many other frameworks of relationship that I fall into in this life. And I think, yeah, the constant one that I'm sitting with is the one with self, and how I realize that how my connection with myself, my learning of self through self, has tainted my external relationships. So my deep connections with everyone else and anything else, seen and unseen, named and unnamed. And yeah, I think with regard to just how the mere miracle of life as a deep connection, being centered around deep connection as a mere miracle of life, brings me to this Ubuntu, the spirit of Ubuntu, which is deep connection and a sense of humanity that extends from one to one, because our existence is not dependent on self. It's dependent on multiple selves that exist, that have existed and continue to exist. And once again, that now places the ideas of deep connection in a different time paradigm. We can't talk about past, we can't talk about future, because self capacitates everything. So when I'm invited to think about myself in deep connection and how that reflects into my reality and my relationships and the people around me, I'm firstly drawn to my shit. Let's take it out of the bag. My shit, my fecal matter, the thing that I go to the bathroom to wipe and flush away that I'm so disgusted about. The thing that has been a process of how your body extracts medicines, how somebody like my mom said, Chevanni, do you want to come through for lunch? How that whole ritual of my mom's love, the fruits from the earth, intention, sharing, connection, all comes to the point of shit. And I, at the end of the day, come to the point where I'm wanting to run away and get rid and even create sensations of being disgusted by this shit. And I think that's once again, another invitation into deep connection of self. Are we in relationship with our shit? A small antidote on this idea of shit. So the idea of shit is very similar to milk from a mother's breast. Our shit has the ability to speak, is a translator from our bodies, from our spirit to the ground. So say I had a sickness, I had a certain sickness or disease. If I shit into the ground, the ground has the ability to translate whatever is wrong, whatever pathogen is in my body, and it has the ability to then create an antibody or a medication or it has the ability to create a specific environment that will allow for the resilience to show up. So my shit that I've been running away from my whole life, that has been thrown away in diapers, that has been put down storage systems to come back as clean water. The one thing I've been running away from is the mere resilience that I embody, is the mere resilience that is not only my, but the locality. So the invitation, and this is something that we also extracted from the previous talk that I was in, was that the idea of composting and even simply locally composting, and not locally composting in the act of vegetables, but also locally composting from the point of taking our collective self, taking our collective traumas, taking our collective pains, taking our collective memories, taking our collective karma, living with that outside of us, living with us, acknowledging that part of ourselves. I think you fall victim to one thing, and that is to honor everyone's shit, because that is the mere connection you have to the next person. That is where that antibody, that is where food is bred, that is where plants grow, that is where flowers grow, that is where pollination happens, that is where friends come together and share meals. That is my mom calling me to say, yo, Chévanni, do you want to come for lunch? That specific environment. And when I'm thinking about this question about deep connections and local resilience, I think it's definitely an invitation for us to build a relationship with our own resilience, and let that resilience, find that resilience in spaces that we don't look. They say, what is it? It's stress or like, what is it? It's like it's the stone that sharpens the sword. Oh, that's but violent and not really where we're going, because that was war-based thinking. But I'm trying to like create, I'm trying to find a word to describe a notion that says that, like, we are in a relationship with so many elements in this world, seen and unseen. And weirdly, there's been this political agenda, geographical, ecological, architectural agenda for us to get rid of our shit. And if we look at the indigenous mind, the indigenous mind saw that fecal matter to be a sacred process of deep connection with the earth, deep connection with one another. There's no such thing as a person that is wasteful. We are not wasteful people. In our nature, we don't capacitate anything that is waste. So even that which we find in our lives right now to be we can assume to be waste, bad relationships, the epoch of great change, the Kali Yuga, the what does the word that Manish says a lot, the like this chaos that we're in. Let all of this, and not just the external chaos, I'm talking about your own chaos, that own shit you're dealing with. Let that be the invitation for you to build your own personal local resilience, a locality of your body, your mind, your eyes, your nose, your heart, the locality of your hands, your feet, and the mountains and the sand and the people that you touch, a locality of your spirit that interacts whether you see it or you don't see it. And I think naturally that will start to invite the unseen and the unnamed to be part of our existence, and maybe invite those ideas or those entities or those spaces to be part of this locality that we find resilience in. And yeah, I think with that I'll be complete then.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chévanni, for bringing shit into the discussion. And we'll take another 15 seconds or so for everybody just to feel what has just been shared, and integrate it. Let it settle. Connect the different strands, the different threads. And nice, we see the shit emojis making it into the chat. Beautiful. And from here, we'll welcome Erin, who is going to share a bit on what is alive for her in this exploration.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, so just coming into my body, I feel a little like lump in my throat and a little like butterflies in my stomach. This is the first time I've ever been on a panel before. I feel like that's like a success in life. Yeah, just so grateful for all of the different threads coming in here. And I'll just start with a little brief story. I love that we're not sharing our bios in this panel. That's awesome. But maybe I'll share a little about me through this story, which is that almost 16 years ago, Manish and Yayo and many other friends, we gathered in Oaxaca, about an hour from where I am right now in southern Mexico, for something that we called the Learning Centering gathering, the art of learning centering, which is all about resilience and locality. And we were working with different organizations, communities. And I mean, I can't say that this is the origin of this term, but I do remember that it's one of the origins of the term translocal, which as I've continued to work in these fields over the last 15 years, I feel like is one of the things that's just kind of stayed steady, is the sense of grounding in the local and then sharing through the translocal. And I love that that's still alive. And I feel like there's the thing that's most present for me from that experience and that kind of backdrop is the way that those relationships have continued to nourish us, even though that community no longer formally exists. You know, so I have this beautiful kurta that Manish brought to me a few years ago. I now am partners with Yayo and live here. Like the relationships become this like ground, right? It is the soil that nurtures us, that gives us the energy to continue learning and growing. And these last few days, a few kind of threads that I'll bring in, as this is our last session, an opportunity to kind of like integrate and digest, you know, to use the metabolizing metaphor. And one is, yeah, just like breaking through this concept that we're separate, solid selves, that we really are a mixture of different people, different energies, that we're not units, you know, to be utilized in this dominant system, the modern system, the capitalist system. And I was saying to Dan in our breakout room, there's something about being able to pay attention, to lean into that kind of where we're entangled, to our not separateness. And I'm not saying this in a way of, I don't really believe in like the simplicity of we are all one necessarily. It's very complex, but something about staying with the mystery of what we can't know and what we can't conceive of is going to offer us new ways of learning. And I think really starting to see how we balance out the rational analytic mind with our body knowing, with our heart knowing, with our sense knowing, like what is the direct experience that we're having in this moment, rather than an idea or a rationalization or a concept. And we're going to have those. The rational mind will not probably go away, but if we can balance out and strengthen these compasses that arise through our bodies, through our hearts, through direct perception, and start to, I think a lot of what's been alive for me through these days is that we've overvalued certain ways of knowing. And so like the practice, and that's why I was like, let's flirt, let's breathe, let's be in our bodies and experiment together. We can start to attune those compasses, and that intuition will give us new paths and new strengths. So there's a couple more things that I'll just say quickly before we close the kind of panel part. One is it really requires slowing down. So we have to be able to move into a new temporality to stay with. And that the relationships, the entanglements, sometimes they're really fucking hard. It's conflict, it's differences of opinion. So how do we really stay with the trouble without solutionizing it? And this constant tending toward how do we solve this problem, we also have to unlearn that. And I loved, Eleanor said in the session this morning on the Kali Yuga, we just need more interesting problems. Like these problems we're facing, they're just so blah. So how do we slow down to stay with the trouble and also with the joy that comes? And then the other thing is like strengthening new ways of perceiving. And I think that first exercise that we did in the opening ceremony of having our eyes closed for a long time, we're starting to tune into what can we hear? What can we sense on our skin? Yeah, how do we flirt with the problems? How do we dance with them? And so there's something about our listening, but not just listening to the words, like also listening, as Chevanni was saying, to ourselves, being in this erotic relationship with our own being in a way that opens new paths. So that's what I'll add. Thank you so much.
Lovely, lovely. So we'll take another silent, slow transition. Feel what's alive in your bodies. Feel if there's anything in your heart that wants to be spoken into the space. And going to float another invitational prompt, which the whole group is invited to respond to. So we're inviting people to unmute and share what's alive for you, relating to the prompt, relating to anything else. The prompt is, what is the relationship between global solidarity and local resilience? How is it happening? And how can we cultivate it? And this was just pasted in the chat. So if anybody feels called to speak to this, we have about 15 minutes. So be aware there's 50 plus people in the room. So try to share your essence, but also leave space for others. And I will mute myself now, and silence is also welcomed in this process of sharing. So if there are long periods of silence in between shares, that's very okay. And we'll take that as a form of communication. So I will silence myself now, and whoever feels called to share is welcome to unmute and speak into the space.
Perhaps I'll just share something quickly here. I'm so grateful for the extraordinary energy and experience that's been created, the solidarity that's been created here. And everyone here is doing such interesting things, and it feels like I've been recharged by being here this weekend and developing my resilience, and my confidence and my relationships, so I can actually go and impart my wisdom locally and make something happen locally. So it's increasing my local resilience, and us coming together has really increased our global solidarity and global connection. And I'm really looking forward to participating on whoever that group of people might be that keep this global solidarity alive and really nurture our eco, our little home that we've created here, this special space that we've created, and give it a life of its own, and see what grows from the seed that was created over these last few days by this extraordinary group of people. Thank you, everyone, for your relations, to all my relations.
Hi, everyone. Yesterday, we did a visualization in the regenerative cultures session where I think it was Andrew, I just cannot remember his name. He asked us to kind of imagine the carbon footprints by all these big countries like the United States footprint and the European footprint and then the African footprint. And I was visualizing this and I live on an island, a small island, Sri Lanka. And I remember looking at these big circles and this huge tsunami coming over me. And when you think about the emissions and the consequences of climate change for people who live on islands like us, and coming to this, the topic of global solidarity and local resilience, Sri Lanka and other island nations who are going to get the brunt are currently being hit by the consequences of climate change, don't have the economic capacity or the ability or the regimes to fight through what's coming. And already you see this with migration and what's going to happen when it gets much harder to live. It could be catastrophic. So in terms of global solidarity, I would like to call for each one of you, anywhere you are, to kind of pressure your countries to take that responsibility towards these countries that are struggling to move through in these times, to build that resilience, to kind of build the partnerships and not not keep them alone. So yeah, just pressuring your own nations, your own industries towards like the best measures of taking accountability. And I think the sustainable development goals and responsible consumption and production can play a huge role. So yeah, I just call everyone to action to pressure their states.
I want to ask to add something into this, because it feels still that solidarity is something that we need to go and offer to the world. And I feel that solidarity should be the fuel that moves us in everyday life. So by strengthening the local resilience, you're contributing to the global solidarity, because as has been used the metaphor very widely in this another context, the mycelium of human nourishment is working down there. So you need to nourish the soil, because it will help and nourish the plants in the other side of the world. And a good example of that just happened a few months ago, when a big number of Zapatistas, activists and Zapatistas, members of their community, traveled to Europe to encounter face-to-face and talk with other grassroots movements in the other side of the ocean. And what was surprising to the whole people, at the point that the mainstream media decided to not talk about it because they don't understand it, is how the hell these people that live in squatter houses, or that have like peasants movements in rural Italy, knew about and are talking at such a high level with these Indians in this jungle of Mexico. Like, how it's impossible that they knew each other before of this. Who is the big power behind that? And it's not, it's just by cultivating your own resilience, you're inspiring others in the other side of the universe to find what works for them. So that is the first step of that. And of course, we should pressure governments. Of course, we should keep banging the wall of the system, but it's not by defeating the system or reinventing their own terms that the new will sprout. It is sprouting from our own creativity that we build at the local, at the small level, and then ripples and inspire change around the system to create other system. Is the other full or not? Maybe that is not the most important part right now.
I would love to add something. I don't know if you have already speak. Are you listening to me well? Yeah, thank you so much. I think I agree a little bit with your idea, this idea of global solidarity. Sometimes it reminds us a movement of going outside, of going in another country, of and sometimes it goes with the hierarchy that we have talked a lot in our conferences, because even though when we, for example, when we go to another place, another village, and even though we want to help, but we don't consider local people as empowered already to dance with their problems, we are coming from a feeling of superiority, and it's a kind of global solidarity that it comes from the ego. So maybe by the relationship with the global solidarity and local resilience is a relationship that is the key to really build a real global solidarity that comes not with the ego, but it comes from the need of the soul to being with, to care. And I think first of all, to listen, because when we go, for example, when we go in another place that we think in the hierarchies that the colonization created in our world, when we go to a place that it's have been exploited a lot by these hierarchies, by the history of our globe, and we think we have the solution. That's I think that's the mentality that comes from the ego. I'm not sure, but it at least it's something that I feel. And so when we are in the position of power, the first thing that we need to do is to listen. And so listening to the local resilience, it's going to allow us to build this global solidarity that it's about care, listening, being with, and not about ego. And I do believe that, like EU, I don't know if I pronounce your name correct. Yeah, also like by fostering our local resilience or local solidarity, we are already doing global solidarity too.
I'd like to share a few thoughts that have come up. I'm just scanning my screen to make sure I didn't interrupt anyone. Hi, I'm Delaney. Some thoughts that have come up through this question being posed and hearing everyone who has spoken. Thank you for all of your words, and thank you for those who haven't spoken. You're not words in your presence. What is the relationship between global solidarity and local resilience? A common thread that I'm finding between those two is it can be framed in a couple of different ways. Localization to me feels like a form of activism. I say that because when there's perhaps a tone or pressure or happenings around corporate and industrial measures or directions. Localization is certainly a form of activism against that, or providing an alternative for that. And solidarity, I also think of the word unity. And I think that's both a form of activism and a form of resistance, kind of a nonviolent resistance, a way of, through care, love, respect, reverence for self and others, you are resisting. And I think particularly, as has come up in many sessions and is just apparent in our world, in a time that divisiveness is used as a political tool, divisiveness is the other. Someone said that earlier in the session, when we think about dissolving the boundary of the other, where might that lead us? That leads to solidarity and unity. And yeah, I think, how is this happening and how do we cultivate it? It is a complex question and a simple one at the same time. One way that I think I'm actively trying to embody and embrace is just treating others with respect and reverence, recognizing the humanity or non-humanity in all living beings, living things, and creating a space for that recognition and belonging. Yeah, good to see all you activists and passive resistors here. I love it. Non-cooperation, all of that.
Lovely. And we have space for one more share. If anybody feels the urge to close this session out, you have that opportunity.
I'll share just quickly. When I read these questions in the chat, I thought about all of us diasporically placed throughout the world. And then when I listened deeper, what I realized is that I feel in a way that I'm a manifestation of global solidarity and local resilience, because in all truth, if there being someone who is of multiple cultures and a product of war, and there's really no way for me to I guess what I'm trying to say is the only way that I'm able to cultivate this relationship is to recognize my own inherent worth and find new ways of listening to my wounds and then that, I think, helps me in the cultivation. So I don't know, just wanted to speak that into the space.
Beautiful. And another slow transition, feeling how the words, how the wisdom, how the experience has landed. And we're going to slowly transition into the closing carnival. And to start that transition, Erin is going to bless us with a dance song.